Right, so good morning.
Good morning.
What would you like to work on in this session?
Mm, I would like to work on my avoidance behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I actually have an opportunity which I was looking for from a very long time to give a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I have this opportunity in front of me, I'm trying to avoid it.
Mm-hmm. So you were looking forward to this opportunity for a long time,
Yes,
and then now you are avoiding it, right?
yes.
And what you would like to do?
I would not like to, I would not, I would like not to avoid it.
So you would like to go ahead with the presentation?
Yes, I would
Okay,
like to go ahead
fine.
with the presentation.
So how do you feel when you're about to avoid? In the sense, like, what kind of feelings are making you avoid this?
Uh, Rather, whether I'll be able to do it
Mm-hmm.
or not, whether it will go well, like whether all the students or the people who are listening to the presentation will like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
What if I forget or what if I do a mess?
Mm-hmm. Now, these are your thoughts. How do you feel when you think like this?
I don't feel good, when I think like
And
this.
can you label that feeling when you think like this? You don't feel good, and which is what feeling?
I feel anxious.
You feel anxious, right? And instead of feeling anxious, how would you like to feel so that you go ahead with the presentation?
Rather not anxious,
Mm-hmm.
but at least some little anxious.
Little anxious. You would like to reduce your anxiety,
Yes,
so you wouldn't want to get rid of the anxiety completely.
yes, I want to get rid
You
of
want to get rid of the anxiety
anxiety
completely, right?
completely.
So how about feeling concerned but not anxious? So you're careful about your presentation. You also work towards the presentation well, and you're not ignorant or you're not indifferent towards the outcome. Would that make sense?
Yes,
Right. So you don't want to be indifferent and feel nothing about the presentation, but you
yes,
would like to feel concerned and not anxious about it,
yes.
right? Do you also think there is a connection between your anxiety and your avoidance?
Yes,
Hmm. If you were concerned and not anxious, would you continue to avoid or you would probably go ahead?
I would go ahead
You would
because
go ahead.
I always wanted to do
Mhm.
this, so I would go ahead.
You would go ahead, right? So can we set that agenda for today's session is to feel concerned and not anxious
Yes,
about the upcoming presentation,
yes,
right? Okay, fine. So now to help you reach this goal, we will have to examine one specific incident where you felt anxious, and then you will understand how you get anxious and how to shift your feelings from anxiety to concern. So would you mind me telling me a specific incident where you had a chance to go ahead with preparing for the presentation but you didn't?
Uh, Recently, I have a social group
Hmm.
where there was a chance that they wanted a presentation regarding a particular topic,
Hmm.
and they have asked me for the dates to like give me my dates when I would be presenting.
Mhm.
And I have been just postponing it, and not giving them the dates.
Is this the same presentation that you are postponing or this is a different one?
Um, this is again a different one.
This is a different one, but this
Yeah.
is a specific example.
Yes, this is a very specific example, which I always like on the back of my mind. This example is always disturbing me, or it is always coming to my mind that I did that postponing thing.
Hmm. All right. So let's take this incident where there was this social group and they asked you about a date for presentation. And in this situation, do you remember the incident clearly?
Yes, very
Right.
clearly.
So when you chose to avoid it, can you remember that in that moment?
Yes,
Right. What was going through your mind that made you avoid it?
whether I will be able to do it properly,
Mhm.
or whether they will like it or not. Am I that qualified to give the presentation?
Mhm. Now these are the doubts that you had
Yes,
in your head. Could you convert them into statements?
I'm. I'm not qualified
I'm
to.
not qualified.
I am. People will not like it,
People will not like it.
and I will not be able to deliver it.
And when you thought these, how did you feel?
I didn't. I was feeling nervous rather,
Nervous
and not happy even,
not happy, nervous,
and anxious also.
anxious. On a 0 to 100, how distressing was this anxiety?
It was very distressing. I think 80.
80. So that was pretty intense, right?
Yes.
It is like death anxiety. Something is going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it was that intense.
70 rather than I would
Right.
say.
Okay. What was your natural intention to do at that time when you felt so anxious?
I just told them कि I'm busy for a while and I will just let you know the dates when I am free and when can I take up the presentation.
So this is what you did?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything else going on in your mind that I want to do this?
No.
And what in this entire incident was most anxiety provoking for you?
Whether I will be able to give the presentation or not.
Mhm.
Whether the presentation would go well or not.
So having to make a presentation was the trigger.
Yes.
Your thoughts were, I won't be able to make the presentation well.
Yes.
I'm not qualified, and these people will not like it. These were the thoughts that were going through your head. And then you felt anxious about it. You felt nervous about it. You also escaped, or you bought time by telling them, I'll get back to you.
Get back to
Right?
you,
So you
yes.
postponed accepting the invitation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So did I summarize that well?
Yes.
So we'll go ahead with finding out where your anxiety comes from. So when you thought these three thoughts, you felt very anxious. Out of these three thoughts, which was most important thought for you that made you anxious?
Whether I will be able to do it or not.
So your prediction that you will not be able to do it well?
Yes, that I will not be able to do it well.
Do it well, right? Okay. Let's assume for the sake of therapy that you do not do it well. We are trying to find out where your anxiety comes from. Are you with me?
Yes.
Right. So if you don't do it well, what does that mean to you?
That I'm not competent enough.
You're not competent enough.
Yes.
Hmm.
I'm incompetent.
You're
rather.
incompetent, and therefore you're not able to do it well.
Yes.
Right. So do you think that this label and the rating you have attached to it has something to do with your anxiety? I'm incompetent. How?
When I say I'm incompetent,
How do you feel?
then I feel anxious.
Mhm.
As well as I feel very disappointed rather.
So it's usually self-downing when you say that I'm incompetent. You might feel depressed or ashamed when you say this. Depressed. And when you have to present a presentation, you will feel anxious because the underlying thought is I'm incompetent. Do you see the connection between your depression and your anxiety? Let's double check it, right? Let's assume that you do make a very bad presentation. You do not live up to the mark, or your presentation is not up to the mark. In spite of this, you don't believe that you are incompetent. Let's say, in spite of this, you don't believe that you are incompetent. You say that just my presentation was bad, but you don't believe that you're incompetent. Would you be anxious in the first place before the presentation began?
Can we do
Right. Let's assume hypothetically that you make a very bad presentation.
Okay.
And even in this situation, you don't call yourself incompetent. You're a kind of a person who does not call herself incompetent, even in case of a bad presentation. Imagine yourself a person who does not label herself as incompetent, even if things go wrong.
And still, then
Then would you be anxious about a presentation?
No, then why would
That's what I'm saying. So if you were not to label yourself as
Sir.
incompetent,
Huh.
you would not be anxious
Yeah.
in case
Yes.
of a presentation where there are chances that it may go wrong.
Yes.
Hmm.
If I do not label myself incompetent, then I would not be anxious.
You would not be anxious. So the possibility of a presentation going wrong,
Hmm.
does that make you anxious? Or your own belief that you are incompetent in such a case makes you anxious?
I'm incompetent.
Correct.
The possibility of presentation going wrong would make me incompetent.
That would only make you,
Not a good presenter.
this is what you think. My point is, does this possibility lead to your feelings, or your own labeling leads to your feelings?
Labeling.
Labeling leads to feelings. Is that good news?
I don't know.
I think that's a good news. You tell me how.
So that if I do not label myself,
Mhm.
then I will not be anxious.
Right. And at the same time, the possibility can never be zero. You can always goof up in a presentation, right? But if you're anxious, the chances of making a bad presentation are more.
More.
So worst case scenario, presentation goes wrong. If you are prepared for it and you do not beat yourself up, you do not label yourself as incompetent, you are probably going to be a little more confident in that case.
Yes.
Right. And if you're more confident, your thought clarity would be better, so you will be most likely be able to present better if you are concerned and not anxious.
Yes.
So I want you to examine this belief of yours that you are incompetent if you don't make a presentation well. How convinced are you that you are an incompetent person if you do not present well?
Yeah. Uh, if the presentation doesn't go well, it does not make me incompetent.
It does not?
No.
Why?
Because I am a different person
Mhm.
and a presentation is a different thing. Just one presentation will not make me incompetent. Mm,
This is what you're thinking now, but that time when you were anxious, you had a different conviction, right?
Yes,
What were you convinced of that time? That if my presentation goes wrong, it means?
I'm incompetent.
And now you're thinking differently. Are you anxious now?
If I think this way, I'm
Hmm?
not anxious.
You're not anxious. So what does this suggest? The chances of presentation going wrong are equal. Even if you make a presentation now, there are chances that it will go wrong, but you're not anxious now.
No, but there are chances that it might go well also.
But you were not focusing on those chances that time, right?
Right.
So when your belief is triggered that I'm incompetent, you also overlook the chances that it might go well.
Go well. Yes.
We'll come to that later, but we're just assuming the worst case scenario, that let's assume that the presentation goes wrong. The point I'm trying to make is that time you were thinking differently, now you're thinking differently, and your feelings are different. Which means that what you think about the presentation going wrong has a huge role to play in your anxiety.
Yes.
What you think is you are incompetent in case the presentation goes wrong.
Yes.
And I want you to check if this belief of yours is valid or not. Would you like to check?
Yes, I would like to.
So I do understand. I'm with you that if a presentation doesn't go well as per your standards or somebody else's standards, and if it goes wrong, for instance, you do make some mistakes. So it might mean various things. For instance, you do not have the knowledge that is required. You do not have the skills that are required.
Yes.
Right? You do not have the competencies
That are required.
that are required, right? So it might suggest that you have or you lack certain attributes, and I'm with you on that, right? So let's say that you lack certain competencies.
Hmm.
That is proven beyond doubt,
Okay.
right? But how does that mean that you are an incompetent person?
If I don't have the knowledge, if I don't have the skills, if I don't have the competencies, so it will make me,
That means you are a person who lacks these competencies,
yes, that means
right?
I'm a person who lack these competencies.
Right.
And
But how does that mean that you are an incompetent person?
yes, it does not mean that I'm an incompetent person, but I'm a person who lacks these competencies, that is the
Correct.
knowledge, the skill, and the competencies which are
True.
required.
So competencies is not you. For instance, if you have a competency, it doesn't mean you are competent. Let me give you an example. I have ring. I am not ring.
Yes.
All right. I have a phone. I am not phone. I have it or I don't.
Yes.
In a similar way, you have a competency, but you are not competent. So you lack or have an ability. You
Yes.
lack or have a skill.
Skill.
You lack or have a competency. Fine, I'm with you on that.
But that does not make me an incompetent person.
It does not define you fully and accurately.
My skills are different from a person I am.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're not your skill.
Yes.
Skill is just a small part of the whole human being. We are made up of so many complex attributes. Skill is just one of them.
Yes.
And it would be a little too much to label a person based on their skill or behavior or knowledge or their finances or their looks or their materialistic possessions or their social status. I mean, like, these are few things that we define human beings on, but they are pretty inaccurate to
Yes.
to label anyone
Very
as
well.
good or bad based on these things. So coming back to the point, um, how much are you convinced that lacking a competency does not make you incompetent?
Yes, I am convinced
You're
that
convinced.
my skills and me we are different. Skills can be learned, and they can be learned over time. They can be mastered over time.
Mastered over time.
Yes.
And you will have to do what to master them?
I'll have to study more, practice more
Mhm.
to do that.
And fail more.
So that.
Goof up with presentations more. So, when you make mistakes, you learn best.
Yes.
So, this is your conviction now, but as human beings, our conviction is very unstable. It goes up and down with adversities. So why don't you prepare yourself for an adversity and convince yourself in case of an adversity,
Hmm.
because right now there is no adversity, right?
Right.
If you are able to convince yourself in adversities, excuse me, I think you will be able to manage your feelings better next time. And then when you are able to manage your feelings, you will also be able to get over the avoidance that you were talking about.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Would you mind practicing this, what you have learned in this session, in a real life situation?
Yes.
Right.
I would like to.
So, how about getting yourself invited for a presentation or making a presentation and actually making a mistake that only you know?
Yes. I can.
You can, right?
Yes. There is a presentation coming up.
Okay. And how likely are you to avoid this presentation?
No, now I am not likely to avoid it. In
Why?
fact, yes.
Okay, great, wonderful.
In fact, I would just call them and tell them that.
So why don't you call them right now? Do you have a phone?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you make a call right now?
I make a call right now. Okay.
Okay, take your phone and
Hi. Uh, you were talking about the dates. So, yes, we can do it. Uh, okay, next week would be fine with me. Yeah. Yes, yes. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, that was quick. So did she give you a date or it's gonna be decided?
It's going to be decided. Within a day, she'll just let me know the
So
date
she's
and
going to
time.
let you know. I
Yes.
thought like,
No, she was just going to tell me, my tentative dates would be. So,
and then
she-
you're going to confirm it, right?
yes.
Did you feel anxious before making the call?
No,
No, not really.
no, not
Okay.
really.
That's cool.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So now I would want you to actually prepare for the presentation in this week and have a slide that has one mistake in it.
Okay.
Mm. And
Yes.
then you would know that you have made a mistake in the presentation. And I want you to feel anxious about it.
But when I know that I have made a mistake, then how would I feel anxious about it?
You never know.
Let me try.
When you know that you have made a mistake, you will
Yes.
know that it's not up to the mark.
Yes.
You might feel anxious about it. No?
No.
What can trigger anxiety in you about a presentation?
My predictions that it might go wrong.
Okay. And how can we actually bring on this anxiety in real life?
Like, I did not get
What
it.
can actually make you anxious?
The predictions, the future predictions.
Correct.
Make me
And how can
anxious.
we
The
experimentally
negative rather the
make you
negative.
anxious?
Experimentally, it's not possible.
Not possible.
Yes.
You're cured.
Oh.
You will kick me out of the business very soon if you get cured in one session. Alright, okay. Anyway, I mean, like we'll try it out. The goal of an experiment is to actually make you anxious, and then you ask yourself these questions so that you can get over this anxiety.
Okay.
So, can we formulate some questions for you that you can ask before a presentation?
Yes.
And would you make formulate a question that you can ask yourself before a presentation based on what you learned today?
Even if the presentation goes wrong,
Mhm.
it does not make me incompetent.
This is a statement.
Uh,
Convert it into a question.
Even if the prediction goes wrong, does it make me an incompetent person?
Right.
How does it make me an
Incompetent person. If the presentation goes wrong, not the prediction.
If the presentation goes wrong, how does it make me an incompetent person?
And not a person
And not a person
who lacks competence.
who lacks competence.
Hmm.
So even if the presentation goes wrong, how does it make me an incompetent person and not a person who lacks competence?
Right. But do you know the difference clearly? A person who lacks competence is
Yes.
different from a label, incompetent person, right?
Yes, I was labeling myself as an incompetent person, but now I am a person who has certain skills, certain incompetencies
Correct.
which can be mastered, or which can be learned.
Okay. Because when you call someone as incompetent, they are stable, it's unchangeable. But when you call yourself as a person, that's something that can change. For instance, they can learn, they can unlearn certain things. Great. So what is the take-home message from today's session?
Take-home message is that I am a person
Mhm.
who has different skills. If I don't have some skills, they can be learned.
Mhm.
That is the one take-home message, and I cannot label myself as an incompetent person.
Mhm.
And moreover, the coping question which you have given me, that uh, if the presentation goes wrong, how does it make me an incompetent person and not a person with the who lacks competencies?
Wonderful. And when will you ask this question to yourself?
This is whenever I feel anxious, or
Okay.
whenever something comes up where I have that anxiety getting triggered, or
Right.
whenever I have a doubt or a prediction.
Wonderful.
That time.
And whenever you have an urge to avoid the presentation,
Yes.
you might ask this question to yourself. And worst case scenario, if you fail at making a presentation, or if you make a mistake during presentation or after it, you might ask this question to yourself.
Okay.
So what was the best thing about today's session? What did you like most in today's session?
That I cannot label myself as an incompetent person, and uh, my skills are different from a person. Like I have a person who is different. Like I'm a person who has different skills, different abilities, and which can be learned. That is the take.
So the best part about today's session
Yes, the
was
best part.
learning that you are a person
Yes,
who lacks competencies or has competencies but is
Competences.
not incompetent.
yes.
Anything that you didn't like about today's session?
No, there was nothing.
Nothing. Anything else that is on your mind which needs urgent attention or something?
No,
No, nothing. Right?
no.
Alright, so I'll see you next week, and
Okay.
I hope that you do this small homework, which is just monitoring your thoughts, asking yourself questions that we have devised, and if you can write down the experience that you have gone through, if you are able to change your feelings, and if you are able to break this habit of avoidance, that
Avoidance.
would be great.
Okay.
Right?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.